DuckTalks is part of Res TV's network of podcasts. Check out res.tv for other great podcasts. It's the week of Wednesday, December 18th, and you're listening to episode 88 of DuckTalks. Hey there, Duck fans, and welcome to a very special episode of DuckTalks. If you haven't seen us on social media talking about this episode, or if you maybe didn't read the title to the episode, we talk with Frank Angones, co-producer of DuckTales 2017, on this episode of the podcast, so you have that to look forward to. I've waited to the very last minute to record the intro to this episode just because I knew I was going to have such a crazy week following our interview with Frank that I wanted to record this before I put it out and not too far ahead. We had a great time talking with Frank. It was just as enjoyable of an interview as we ever could have asked for, and we were extremely excited about the interview. It's something we'd been talking with him about for a little while. He had to get certain permissions at Disney to be able to come on and talk about the show, and also he wanted for the show to be at a place where he could talk about as much as possible, because they're very secretive about DuckTales and what's coming up, which is a good thing for the show, I believe. I think it's good for us as fans that they're invested in protecting the mysteries that are to come. So, yeah, I'm not gonna go into a lot here before I let the episode start up and the interview begin. Just want to say thank you all very much for listening to this podcast. If this is the first time you've listened to Duck Talks, welcome to the show, and you're in for a treat with this episode. And we hope you go back and listen to some of our past episodes, and also be on the lookout for future episodes. We will most likely take a break over the next few weeks. We've got an idea of something that we would like to do coming up soon with Christmas season and Disney Plus and all of that. So we may get into that. We may have one more episode before we take a break, but if not, we will be back in the new year with more of Duck Talks and more of our conversations and discussion about DuckTales and the Disney afternoon and everything merchandise, video game, and streaming service related. So yeah, lots for us to talk about, and we're looking forward to jumping into some of those series that have premiered on Disney Plus while we wait for this hiatus to be over. And without further ado, here is the interview that we had. It was me, Pirate Steven, my name's Mitch, Pirate Steven, and Josh with Frank Angones, the co-producer of DuckTales. Hey there, Duck fans, Mitch here, and I'm joined by Pirate Steven and Josh. We have a special guest on the phone with us tonight for a very special episode. This episode's so special, we're going to name it after one of our favorite segments, frankly speaking, because we have Frank Angones on the line with us.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How's it going?
You have no idea how excited we are, Frank.
Oh, that's very sweet. Look, it is rare for one to have one's name invoked almost on a weekly basis on a podcast, so I am also very excited, and I appreciate you guys so much.
Well, for those who are new to the podcast, or maybe just stumbled across, Frank is co-producer of the new DuckTales series, of which inspired us to start a podcast and eventually a website. They were kind of in tandem. So, your work's very important to us. We're huge fans. We're so excited to have you on. We've been fanboying for days because we've known about this, and we're excited to have you on, and got a few questions for you. Looking forward to talking about you and your fandom to begin with, for DuckTales and Disney Ducks, and then also to talk a little bit about this show you've been working on.
I think you mostly want spoilers. Is that?
No.
I will lay them all out. Okay, so the
we will
first
take any
episode of
spoilers.
Season 3, exterior. No, okay.
Wait, go on.
Yeah. All right. And you were saying?
Oh shoot! I'm sorry. It's an interior. I just remembered. I've ruined this already.
Is it a familiar spot?
Nope. Well, depends.
Mm.
Depends on who you are and where you live.
That totally sounds like Darkwing Duck related.
We're not going to start the season with Darkwing Duck, guys. I haven't won total autonomy over the crew yet.
But nobody would expect it. It would be perfect.
You know, for the longest time, I think we pulled it off. One of the things I geeked out the most about in season 1 was the idea of starting Beware the Buddy system with just cold open Darkwing with no introduction, to the point where there was a big debate as to whether or not we should announce that Darkwing was going to be on the show at Comic-Con that year, because I was so jazzed about the possibility that people would just be tuning in and without warning you would see a big Darkwing Duck opening sequence. But ultimately, we feel like we made the right choice because it let a lot of people know what our show was and what it was about. And they didn't know where it was coming, and they didn't know how it was coming. And then when they found out how it was coming, they got really mad until they found out that wasn't all we were doing.
Well, when that episode came out on Disney Now, I think Pirate Steven and Mitch, and they pulled it up on their phone and instantly started texting like, "You gotta watch this episode! You gotta watch this episode!" And it's like midnight. we're like, "Okay, let's watch this episode right now." And
for context, he's in California, so when he says it was midnight, it was 3 a.m. our time.
It was worth staying up for that night.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, full disclosure, I had went to bed. And I got a message from Pirate going, "You're not going to believe how the episode starts."
Oh my god.
So I had to get up and watch it. You know, that has been one of the things that has been pretty difficult for I think all three of us, in that we're such huge fans of Darkwing Duck. I mean, like, we love DuckTales too, but it was difficult knowing he was going to be in DuckTales and not allow that to take over for us, because we really love the characters the way you all have portrayed them, the characters that they've become on your show. And so but at the same time, there's this urge to say, but it's Darkwing. So I think you guys have done a great job of towing that line, of sprinkling him in there. And I know a lot of people got upset with that cold intro, because as cool as it was also one of those moments of, oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
Which is kind of iconic for the show.
We had a very long game that was mostly and I will say this, everything Darkwing stems from Launchpad. I think that's, at least our version of Darkwing stems from Launchpad, simply because it was an idea that we had when we were figuring out all the characters at the very beginning. And we were trying to figure out, the original, when you start off Launchpad in original DuckTales, he's trying to be this hero guy, and he's got a bit of an ego and a little bit more swagger, and can sometimes get people in a lot of trouble just by trying to prove himself, which isn't the most likable trait. And then he evolves into this like wonderful, warm, goofy thing over the course of the series, and then cemented by Darkwing. And that became a big question for us, is like, what is Launchpad's true north? And the idea that this is a Launchpad whose hero growing up was Darkwing Duck informed, like, what is that type of guy? Who is that person grow up to be? It is very much okay that he crashes planes and cars and 100 other things because Darkwing is his role model. So kind of in an interesting way, we reversed a lot of what our Darkwing was, dependent on what we wanted our Launchpad to be.
And it's very cool because in
phenomenal. Yeah, Beck Bennett with Launchpad just nailing it, and we just love that character in every episode. I think the first season, every time there was any Launchpad line uttered in it, we thought that was our favorite part of the whole episode.
Baloney.
Yeah, Beck is fantastic.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where everybody else, when we auditioned everybody, when they came in for Launchpad, when we came in for everybody, when everyone else came in, we gave them some kind of guide, or it's this type of person or that type of thing. And with Launchpad, Terry McGovern's performance is so iconic that the only thing you can kind of say is, we don't want to do the Terry McGovern version, but we're just like, Launchpad. We would like Launchpad, please. And a lot of great people came out, and we were very bad at our jobs in trying to explain what we wanted. And then Beck came in and was just perfect and got it 100% and totally sold it. And then he kind of became our defining Launchpad for our show.
I think we've given everyone a good taste of what's to come as we talk about the show a little deeper.
I jumped the gun.
No, I jumped the gun. I started talking about Darkwing. It was my fault.
Can you believe that your interview with me devolved into a lot of talk about Darkwing Duck?
Well, funny story. We've got our notes that we share, and Pirate pointed out to me that there's no Darkwing in my notes that what I put in, and I said that's because my default is Darkwing, and I had to put notes of other stuff to talk about. So
just before the show, we're like, don't talk about just Darkwing. Don't talk about just Darkwing.
So
there's a whole segment. I've already updated the notes.
He's got all new questions. But before we get into any more of that, because there's going to be more of that, Frank, I want to hear about your fandom for DuckTales, Disney Ducks, the Disney Afternoon. Where did it start for you?
It started when the very first shows came on. I was one of those kids that always gravitated towards comedic cartoons, like in a world of G.I. Joes and Transformers. I liked the weird, funny stuff, but that also didn't necessarily scratch my adventure itch or my genre itch or all those kind of things. And so when, I had Fluffy Dogs on VHS. I don't know if you guys know what Fluffy Dogs is, but I had Fluffy Dogs on VHS. I had Wuzzle stickers all over my bed. I was deeply entrenched in the fandom to the point where I just mentioned on Twitter and in my kind of ramblings about the series that when I was starting in kindergarten and all throughout elementary school, I had a stage persona that was known as the One Caballero. And mostly I was known for singing Disney Afternoon theme songs. And DuckTales hit me in a big way. Rescue Rangers hit me in a massive way, where I missed the 5-part. I believe it was a 5. Was it a 5-part or a 2-part pilot for Rescue Rangers? It's 5 parts, right?
Yeah,
I had to meet everybody.
I think they were.
Yeah, I forced my poor parents to drive all over town because I had missed the pilot that explains how everyone got together. And when it came out on VHS, we drove to every store in the greater Miami-Dade County area looking for just that VHS. And it did not exist. I had dreamed that VHS, or I think there was a different Rescue Rangers episode, but they didn't put the pilot on there.
Yeah, I was trying to think if there was one.
And also, let me point out, I could have also called the stores, but
as kids, we didn't think about that.
Yeah. And Darkwing hit me in a very guttural way too. I 4th grade, I had an economics project, and I made a soda called Darkwing Duck-A-Cola because branding, because that's what Darkwing would do. And yeah, I mean, I was a big fan all the way through. I think I watched the Disney Afternoon, certainly through Gargoyles, Aladdin. And then I kind of fell off a little bit, or I rebelled to the Kids WB or went back and forth. But yeah, I always had ducks in my DNA, I guess. And my parents came over from Havana when they were very young. My dad learned how to speak English by reading a lot of old comics, particularly Superman comics, because in the Silver Age, those comics, everyone's dialogue or the text boxes just kind of explained what you were seeing. Mm-hmm. And so my dad kind of carried that around to me. There was a lot of El Pato Loco, which is Daffy Duck, and El Pato Donald. And I read a bunch of those, like old Super Goof stuff too. And so my comics love and my Disney afternoon love all kind of got mixed up to the point where I assumed they were all kind of one thing. And, you really jump and you get excited when Magica and the Beagle Boys make a cameo in an episode of Darkwing. And even if it's never addressed, it's the thing that the Marvel Cinematic Universe realized very quickly, which is I want to play with these characters the way that I played with my action figures when I was a kid, and everybody knows everybody else. And that became a kind of guiding light, and it never really went away, to be honest. The theme song to DuckTales was in my wedding vows. Much to my wife's chagrin.
Did she know ahead of time? That's what I got to know. Did she know ahead of time?
So she had vetoed playing the song as our first dance. And then our friend who was performing the ceremony in the actual vows had a bunch of, do you promise to, it's typical, do you promise to love, honor, and obey? Do you promise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? He said, do you promise to solve mysteries together and rewrite history together? And I looked at her to see if it was okay to say yes. And she nodded. And that's why I knew that she and I were meant to be. I knew that before the wedding, to be clear. But,
I love that. I could just picture you being like, life is like a hurricane.
This is okay.
Together.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm looking at when I sold my very first pilot, they always tell you when you make your first big sale, whenever you make a big sale, you should buy like a little something to commemorate. And I went over to Lonely Planet in New York while I was living in New York at the time. I bought a Darkwing Duck statue that I have here. It's before I worked at Disney, before I worked anywhere. I was like, yeah, that remains my true north. And so I was working at Disney on a TV show called Wander Over Yonder with Craig McCracken. It was my first animated show. I had the best time, worked my way up to story editor, which in animation is essentially head writer, worked really well with Craig. But I had seen kind of on the walls all over the place that there were various teams trying to reboot DuckTales. And they kept having pitches, and lots of different teams went through it and had their different takes. And I would meet with them kind of in the hallways and be like, hey, do you need someone to get you coffee or to be an intern on your show, despite the fact that I'm the head writer of this other show? And everyone was always very polite. But those takes just didn't seem to work out. So I went to my storage unit and I pulled out one of my many giant DuckTales posters and all of my old DuckTales and Scrooge and Darkwing Duck memorabilia and comics, and just kind of littered them around my office. And as Wander was wrapping up, I would invite executives to coffee just to talk about, hey, what's coming up, what's next? And I would always have them meet me at my office. And I put the poster by the door, so as they were leaving, they would see the DuckTales poster and all of the memorabilia, and they'd say, oh, are you interested in DuckTales? We're trying to reboot that. I said, oh, I had no idea. And so I just kind of talked my way onto, it started as a brain trust, and then it became, I went home and wrote my Jerry Maguire mission statement on what I felt it should be, and I got to meet Matt, who at the time had been kind of handed the keys to the convertible, I guess, and we were off from that. So yeah, the extent of my fandom is I rebooted DuckTales.
Well, I've told people frequently that you're one of us, but now it's very clear you are the king of us.
No, no, I'm at least the prime minister.
Wow. I wasn't expecting the wedding vows. That is awesome. And, and I love the insight into the beginnings of the show, because I've wondered, like, was this just something you all came up with and pitched, or was it something that had already begun and you became a part of it? So it's cool to hear that it was something that Disney was already looking into and working on, because I know from listening to Tad Stones about the early days of Disney animation and kind of how it was much different around there then than it is now, and just how much it seems like the company is invested. And obviously, I mean, there's a new streaming platform out there now. I mean, maybe television is the future. But it's really cool to hear that it was already on the radar, because, I mean, of course we know you're going to come in and pitch it and try to get on the show, but to hear that it was already kind of rolling around in some form is really cool.
Well, yeah, you never know with these types of things, right? Like, someone mentions something offhand and is like, oh, yeah, we should do something with that, or we should do something with this. And, it was too juicy an idea to not do, right? Particularly in the current climate of, like, hey, people seem to like serialized television shows. You know who invented the serialized animated adventure comedy? Is you guys, with the first big thing you did.
And there's so many people who still love it. I mean, it's funny when the streaming service hit and all these people were logging in for the first time, and to see on social media all the people that were finding their childhood all over again. And it was really cool to see all these, just everyone, people all over, I guess the U.S. and Canada was later, but on day one, where everyone was just so excited to find, hey, look, Darkwing Duck and DuckTales, and wait a minute, is that Gummy Bears? It's really,
Darkwing
really cool.
Duck was trending for most of that day, and then the Keep Binging Gargoyles was another big one for the first week.
I think everybody was so surprised because we knew there were some shows coming on there, but they put everything on there, and that made people so happy and excited for Disney Plus. And I'm so glad that they did. It's kind of revitalized the people who grew up with it and they want more. And now we have this show, and it's great.
I tell you what I don't hate. I don't hate that when you search for DuckTales, our show also comes up.
Exactly. We've said it a few times on our podcast, and we expected to get some flack, but we never have. Your show has progressed to the point that for us, I mean, it is DuckTales. The characterization and just everything that's taking place, and the fact, and for us in particular, I know for me and Pirate it has been, and I know for Josh it will be. But for us, it's something we've been able to share with our kids, that not only have we been able to share it, like it's, oh, I remember that from my childhood, or that part is from a comic that I read, or this or that. Not only do we get that nostalgia, but it's also speaking to them and also having some good moral stories mixed, or lessons mixed in there too, that we can kind of pull from. So there's that for our kids as well. And it's new for us. So it's not just the old show that we had, which is still fun, but we're huge fans of yours.
Oh, thank you, guys. Well,
you all.
And I'll say this, right? Like, we couldn't not do it the way we did it, I guess. And what I mean to say is that Carl Barks was for a long time an unsung giant in the industry. Now, hopefully, a lot of people know his name. Although, unfortunately, a lot of people seem to think it's Carl Banks, but that's a whole different thing. But Barks wrote the template, right? He was the guy who took a funny, squawking sidekick, funny animal character from Disney shorts, and in a comic called Donald Duck Finds Pirate Gold, he said, what if this character was an adventurer? And it was the entirety of the Disney afternoon owes its DNA to Carl Barks, because he was the first person to take classic cartoon character Donald Duck and put him in an adventurous setting and create a unified mythology around him, right? And create and build out Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and create Uncle Scrooge and the whole extended Duck family. And so kind of our MO when we started on our show was we wanted to do the same thing, which was essentially take these beloved cartoon characters that everyone knows, and find the grounded three-dimensional reasons as to why they acted the way they acted. So it became Donald Duck is angry all the time because he is missing his sister who got hurt, and he's worried about the world is constantly treating him poorly, and he doesn't want that to happen to his kids or his nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Scrooge is, and this is something we pulled from Don Rosa and Life and Times, was that Scrooge's love of his fortune is also grounded in the idea that every single dime, every single treasure carries a story of an adventurous life of a self-made man. And that's what he embraces. And so we took that thrill-seeking adventure thing that he cares as much about the story behind every treasure as on top of its monetary value. Huey, Dewey, and Louie traditionally and originally depicted as troublemakers. Well, why are they troublemakers? And it's because Donald has clamped down on them so hard for so long because he's afraid of something bad happening to them that they just need to act out, and they each have their own form of trouble. And that's why Scrooge in the pilot says, "You kids are nothing but trouble. Curse me kilts have I missed trouble." And that kind of became the basis. And it was all us just trying to do not just do the slavish adherence to everything that had happened before, but looking at the spirit of what Carl Barks did originally and trying to do that in a contemporary way, in a way that spoke to today's kids while also still bringing along people like us who loved this thing to its core. It's we always say there's a special kind of feeling that you get when you hear the word DuckTales, and then people invariably say woo woo. And so the idea was we need to try to recapture that feeling that Barks gave original readers in Donald Duck Finds Pirate Gold and all of his stuff, that feeling that we all got when we watched DuckTales, but we had to do it in a way that spoke specifically to a contemporary audience, both of kids and parents. And so that kind of became the guiding light for everything that we did. But it all comes back to us trying to figure out, all right, this is what Carl Barks did initially. Instead of just repeating everything he had done before, how do we do the type of thing that he did without ever dismissing anything that came before it? Because it's all great, and we always say everybody has their own version of DuckTales. So for some people, it's the cartoon. For some people, it's the Barks comics, or the Rosa comics, or the Italian comics, or the Latin American comics. Some people just know the video game, and that's why we wanted to create this kind of big world where if you loved any kind of DuckTales, any kind of Scrooge thing, any kind of Donald thing, any Disney Afternoon thing from the past 80 years of history, there was going to be something that spoke to you.
Yeah, all the hidden Easter eggs and stuff that you guys have put in the different episodes actually inspired us to read through the Carl Barks and Don Rosa library so that we wouldn't miss anything.
They're great, man. And I love being able to, we get a lot of, because the original DuckTales did a lot of versions of Bark stories, which are all great, did Earthquack and did Seven Sons, kind of. But we never wanted to just do that because they had done that so well. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to just keep redoing old comic stories. We wanted to take inspiration from those comic stories to try to tell contemporary stories.
Yeah, for us, we came from the Disney afternoon. We didn't know the comics all that well, the three of us. And so when we started doing the podcast, we immediately had people messaging us and sending us recommendations of stuff to read. And we were like, wow, this is just kind of overwhelming that, there's all these people who've read these comics and they're huge fans of these comics. And so we were like, okay, how do we do this? How do we dive in? And thankfully we met a couple of people who pointed us in the right directions of where to begin. And we found out about Fantagraphics releases, and they have been phenomenal. And it's really cool finding those connections and seeing, I guess we could call it the source material, and seeing your all's, not interpretation, but your new version of similar. And it's not really even stories, because I think you do a great job of completely diverging from them and yet still holding to, like you said, the concept of the adventure and still sticking to that. And that was one of the questions we wanted to ask, was and I think you've already answered in your other answers, but how familiar were you with these comics? Like Life and Times, we've heard, it was pretty early on that we heard that not only were there going to be references to Life and Times, but there were writers. It was like mandatory that they read Life and Times. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a list of stuff, just because what I feel like Rosa did so well is humanize the characters, and particularly humanizing Scrooge. And so again, it's probably much to the chagrin of Don Rosa. It's not exactly what Barks did. It's not exactly what Rosa did, but we did try to take a look at his methodology and say, all right, what's the notion here? Like, what is the methodology of this? Beyond the kind of sorting out all of because the man is brilliant in terms of weaving hundreds of different issues of comics together into a cohesive narrative. But the big takeaway that we had from that, particularly from Life and Times, is this is a three-dimensional character, and treating a funny animal character with depth and with sincerity, and treating this family as something that matters. And I think where we edge up against his style of thing is when we get to some of those particularly really angry Scrooge moments, really delicate and sincere and sweet family moments. And I think that's something that Rosa does better than a lot of other people. So again, despite the fact that he has a sign that apparently calls us out, and then I found out that we were taken off the sign, and I was offended. And I said, we have to work harder to make him mad at us.
So
yeah, actually met him at a MegaCon convention, and I was brave enough to bring up the fact that in Scrooge McDuck's birthday party, on the crossword puzzle, I found the word Rosa in it. Yep. And he smiled, and I've never seen him smile before. I was afraid to mention anything else about DuckTales, but I had that moment.
I certainly hope he knows, despite whatever he thinks of the show, that he has fans on this crew.
He does, because after Pirate met him, he dared me to talk DuckTales with him. And
why is everything a dare when you guys go talk to Don Rosa?
and I did in Atlanta, but it was a great conversation. And I do want to share with you that the sign's purpose is not that he dislikes DuckTales. He'll tell you the original DuckTales was some of the best television he's ever seen. But his sign is DuckTales in general, because, and I even saw it, he'll have people come up that want him to talk about DuckTales or to sign something that's DuckTales. And he wants them to know, I didn't have anything to do with that. That's right. Not me. I worked on Uncle Scrooge comics and Donald Duck. So like there was a person who brought up the the recent Scrooge pop with the red coat.
Sure.
They brought that up to get him to sign it, and he was like, "That's DuckTales. I didn't work on DuckTales." So I mean,
it doesn't have our colors either. So
yeah, well, it is actually his colors. That's what I was like. But it's the red one. It's not the blue one.
Our logo on it.
Yeah, but it does have your logo.
I will say that was from the very beginning, one of the most nerdy things we said is like, we are going to get Redcoat Scrooge back in the popular conversation. One of the highlights of this entire process was when we got to see Redcoat Scrooge as a parks walk around, and he is in Animal Kingdom. That is the one really nitpicky, really nerdy thing. Is I love original DuckTales. I don't know anyone who can pull off that particular coat other than Scrooge McDuck. the very almost Pinocchio-ish Scarpa Italian look. It's the only thing I'm a pseudo purist on this show.
When they first brought the character into him and Launchpad into Donald's Dino Bash, I got to go like a month or two after it came out. And so we got to go, and it was the first time I got to meet Scrooge ever in my life, you know, the walk around character, and my kids were there, and we got to meet, and Launchpad too. But it was a lot of fun, and that the red coat is definitely, I've seen pictures of the blue one. I prefer the red one in the character, the walk around, but it blew my mind, the attention to detail in that character meet and greet area. And there were so many things that were callbacks to the show that were a lot of fun for us.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw at Christmas when we worked with them about incorporating our version of Lil Bulb into the background with his little plugging in the Christmas lights.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. And also the version of the DuckTales Christmas version is playing there too.
Oh, no kidding! The Life is Like a Candy Cane?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really funny. That is a song that Matt Youngberg texted me at 11 p.m. one night as I was going to bed and said, "Hey, do you want to write Christmas lyrics to the DuckTales song?" And I woke up as if in a fever, and like Amadeus, or probably more like Salieri, just started tinkering away, and within 5 minutes I had all the lyrics. It's like, yes, this is the thing I was built to do, write Christmas lyrics to the DuckTales theme song.
If we find a video or anything of it, we'll get it to you.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, that's exciting to hear.
While we're talking about Disney Park stuff, you have to be excited to know that Epcot's getting some DuckTales love.
I will be more excited when we are done with it. We're pretty much in the thick of it. It's really rad. It's a huge honor. You know, it's real hard to get TV stuff into the parks. Like, that is not easy at all. And we're really proud and honored. And the cool thing is they get the appeal of the show. They had initially come in with something, and we're monsters because we just kept pushing them. They came in and was like, well, we're thinking maybe like Mark Beeks and Magica and maybe just Scrooge and the kids. Or like, well, you got to put Glomgold in there, and you got to have Donald and Launchpad. Like, again, like all these things that we felt made it DuckTales instead of just, you know, Scrooge comics. Mm-hmm. And they've been really great to collaborate with. We've been working on brand new scripts with them. Everything is put through us, and there's a lot of just really cool character stuff. Like, it's really cool to know that first of all, you know, there are two characters that I hold. I'll say three characters that I hold very, very near and dear to my heart from our show. Fenton Crackshell Cabrera, Webby, and Della Duck. Because I feel like those are three things that we did that I hope their characterizations, their personalities become the evolution of who they are. You know, like, those were the three characters. Like, I understand when Huey, Dewey, and Louie revert to their standard Mickey and Friends version. I get that. I get when Scrooge does. I really hope that we've done something for Della, particularly Della as an amputee, and also just as a rad character, and as a cool mom. I just felt like there weren't a lot of cool moms in the Disney canon that felt like all the moms that I know, my wife and all of my friends who are just like trying really hard to make it happen and are neither evil nor perfect, which seem to be the two modes that Disney moms have. and obviously Fenton for personal reasons, and our version of Webby, who is roughly based off of my oldest kid. You know, those are the ones to see that those characters are going to be around a long time after us, and to see that Webby and Della are going to be in the parks is stinking rad.
Yeah, it looks like there's going to be a wide variety of villains in it too. So we're really excited to see how that pans out. And
you and me both, buddy.
Yeah, we're really excited. I was like, oh, they're going to be in it. They're going to be it. So, and one of our favorite villains is Flintheart Glomgold. We absolutely love every time he comes on the show. What was your?
I'm sorry. Could you please hold for lightning crash and maniacal laughter when you say it? Very important.
But what was your process in designing that character for the show?
I didn't design anything of that character. I will be the first person to go out and say, hey, I have zero drawing skills. I'm lucky to, it has forced me to be a very good collaborator with a lot of interesting and fantastic people on this crew. But for Glomgold, you know, we really leaned on the single white female attitude of it. I really liked the idea. You know, every cartoon has the evil version of the hero. And, you know, a couple of times now we've done some kind of exploration of why the evil version of the hero is the evil version of the hero. And with Glomgold, it was, you know, we did Duke Baloney, and I had worked with Keith Ferguson as Lord Hader on Wander Over Yonder, and he just killed everything he did. He's so good at being a blowhard. He's the sweetest human being alive, but just the crazier and more outlandish and more ridiculous he gets, the more in character it is, which is fantastic. Which is why the fact that his scheme in Moonvasion works, and the fact that it's a Glomgold scheme is the reason it works. We felt so vindicated that we had built this ridiculously dumb character. I knew Keith would kill it, and he always does. He has the uncanny. I don't know if you know. He's also, I guess, Reaper on.
We know.
Overwatch.
We know.
He was Blue on Foster's and all that kind of stuff. But he has just the ability to be both furious and petulant and gruff at the same time. And
I have to say, him as Megavolt, I could not tell that he wasn't Dan delivering that line he has in that episode.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I've seen him pick up voiceover on various actors he's never heard of. You play him a clip, and he's uncanny.
Wow.
Like, Keith is phenomenal. And I knew that I really wanted him in our arsenal, and I feel vindicated that I was right.
Yeah, Glomgold became Pirate's favorite character as soon as he found out Keith was voicing him, because he was a Reaper main for a long time.
Huh.
And to this day.
And still,
Yeah, to this day.
But I thought, I wasn't much of a Glomgold fanatic from the original DuckTales, but he was so hysterical in your series. And, every episode it gets even funnier. The funeral scene. I was watching it. I knew
that's where you were going.
Like, where are we going with this episode? And then when it ends up being Glomgold was behind the whole thing, it was just hysterical.
And that episode almost broke Matt Humphries and Bob Snow, figuring out how it worked, because those are two very technically minded artists who want to figure out every inch of everything. So it was really, for Bob, it was like putting together like 12 Usual Suspects movies to make sure that it all made sense. But the key to Glomgold, I think, again, in that world of taking everything you know about the character and finding three-dimensional or grounded or emotional reasons for it, pretty much all most people knew about Glomgold was evil Scrooge and second richest duck in the world. Generally, you know, there's all stuff in the comics and a lot of different backstory and a lot of all this other stuff and stuff with his mom and etc. But the idea that he didn't just want to beat Scrooge at having money, but at literally everything is a very easy game to play when you're in a writer's room riffing. Just the notion that he just has to be the richest, the most beloved, the most Scottish, just every element of it. And also, you know, it's no mistake that our quote unquote Sharper Than the Sharpies season 2 featured Glomgold heavily because every one of his dumb schemes is him attempting to be sharper than the Sharpies. And he's not good at it.
But we did get Sharkas out of it, so.
Yes.
He's a favorite for the series, for sure. And it's such a departure from the original series and some of the comics, you know, and everything that we knew, that it was, for us, it was pleasant. Like it was a nice surprise, especially that his intro coming in, you know, with his sales pitch and everything. It was not expected at all, especially after coming off a great Donald temper tantrum. But I mean, it was so shocking, and just to see this character carrying on like this, and then to see as the plot unfolded. And then when we got to episodes, you know, like the golf episode and the coin toss, which just absolutely had me rolling. There's just so many great moments and a great character. And I think, you know, like you said with Launchpad, it's one of those things where you really had to make the character kind of the series own, and I think it's perfect. But you used parts, like you did a great job of pulling the history of the character and melding it into something that is its own. He is his own for the show, and it's great.
Yeah, another thing we looked at a lot was just what Marvel does with their movies, right? Like, no version of the MCU characters is 100% accurate to the comics, but they take all of the elements that people might like or that people generally know and push them to an interesting degree that still feels at its core like the characters. And so that was kind of one of our big touch points when we were trying to figure out, all right, how do we take stuff from all of these different sources and still have them feel fresh and new and our own.
Speaking of that, we've got to ask this question. What's the deal with Not Roxanne? Like, did Not Roxanne start off, did it just happen and you didn't realize it? Or
yeah, so most of the incidentals, you know, the characters that kind of mill about DuckTales, a lot of, or a Duckburg rather, a lot of them are based off of people on the crew or ideas of people on the crew. I don't think whoever initially designed, I imagine she must have been initially designed. I feel like I remember seeing her in storyboards before we got to actual character designs for incidentals. I think whoever designed her just had that particular type in mind. I don't know for sure if she was actually based on a member of the crew and then it kind of took off and became its own weird thing. I could say definitively it is not Roxanne.
That's what we call her, Not Roxanne.
Yes. No, I think that was just this weird. We got so good at planning Easter eggs that people started finding Easter eggs that we hadn't.
Mm. Yeah,
because I remember in the first episode, or not the first episode, but Webby does say it's the first episode if you're talking Disney Plus.
Right. Yeah, it's Day Trip of Doom.
How dare you?
Webby, I'm trying to work on it. Every day I'm trying to work on it.
Hey, we got an uncanned response this week.
I saw that. That's what we call progress.
Finally. But Webby mentioned something about seeing a dog with a bow tie, and I was like, hey, that's Goofy, right? And you're like, no, it's just a dog.
No, it's just a dog. Yeah.
With a bow tie.
Yeah, if you'd never been out of a mansion for 10 years, you would also be impressed that a regular dog is wearing a delightful bow tie.
Yeah, I had it in my mind that not Roxanne was like a burn on everybody. Nope,
No.
not Roxanne. Not Roxanne. Nope.
No, we don't burn people here. We celebrate them. Then possibly blow them up.
We did want to ask, going back to your fandom just a little bit, we wanted to ask, what do you collect?
Oh, nothing. I have 2 children. No, I have lots of nerdy stuff that is in my office. I don't think there's anything I collect obsessively. I read a lot of comics.
What are you currently reading? Anything you'd like to share?
Oh, I read tons. I love all of Jason Aaron's Thor stuff. Has been great, and he's wrapping up with King Thor. Reading Sea of Stars. What else? That's just another Jason Aaron book. I'll tell you what I loved. I just read Superman Up in the Sky. Have you guys heard of this book?
I haven't.
It was a book that was it's Tom King, and I believe it's either, I don't remember if it's Adam or Andy Kubert, and a lot of people are yelling at me for not knowing that. But it was originally printed. DC had a deal with Walmart to put these big giant reprint editions with some new stories from top name talent. So they had these Batman stories that were written by Brian Michael Bendis, and they have these short contained Superman stories by Tom King. And it's like the definition of Superman, the basic premise of it. It's just 10 parts, and they just released them as single issues. Or I think maybe it's 12 parts. But each one is each individual story is half a comic long, and each one has a big, interesting kind of sci-fi hook, similar to Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. And the basic premise is there's a girl on Earth who is a fan of Superman who is kidnapped by an alien and taken somewhere in space. And you don't know why. And Superman becomes obsessed with finding her. And it becomes this really interesting, well-told, beautiful. Anytime anyone can really define Superman in a way that is inspirational but still human, I really get excited by. And I really loved that book. I'm a big Superman guy. What else? Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the 2 big ones that kind of hit me in a big way recently.
Oh yeah, I just looked up Superman Up in the Sky. I'm gonna check that out because I've never really been a huge fan of the character. Like, there's some things that I've enjoyed with Superman in it, but it's not been a character that I've followed.
Sure.
So, but the story sounds interesting. I'm looking at it on previews right now. I'll check that out.
Yeah, and again, it's also a unique format because it's all pretty self-contained short stories with big swing ideas, and each of them is iconic, which is cool.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to find. I mean, I've tried to, and I think it was Tom King's run on Batman. Didn't he reboot Batman a few years back?
Yeah, I think he's wrapping up his run on Batman right now.
I tried to get into that, and I just felt lost from the very beginning. So within a few issues, I had dropped it again. But it wasn't his writing. It was just there was a lot of plot lines that, even though it was a restart, it felt like it was very rooted in years and years of continuity.
Sure.
So I'd be interested in something that's self-contained.
Yeah, and it all wraps up really nicely and neatly in a way that's a cool examination of the character.
What is your favorite Duck merch that's been released for DuckTales 2017 so far, and what would you like to see in the future?
So far, my favorite piece of Duck merch is the bin, probably. It's just such a cool looking thing. I think the Fat Mojo figures are really, really beautiful. I love the Solving Mysteries and Rewriting History book. The team behind that put in a lot of work, and it really feels like it's within the tone and style of the show, which is rad. Mm-hmm. What I would love to see, I would love to see some more Della stuff. Really would. And I would really love to see more Webby stuff. There's really not a lot. I ordered I think I must have come from the UK Webby shirts for my kids. And, it feels like you get a lot of merch of the boys and a lot of merch of the boys with Webby, but you never get any merch with Webby or Lena or Violet. I think a lot of that comes from the perception that DuckTales is a quote-unquote boys' property, despite the fact that we work really hard to make it a kind of gender-neutral show.
Yeah, I ordered 2 of those Webby shirts as soon as they became available as well.
Yeah, and I realized that they didn't come in my size.
My daughter wears hers once a week. No kidding. It's the shirt that gets asked, has it been washed?
Yeah. I think the DuckTales socks that Target had were pretty popular as well.
Yeah, and one day I'm going to find the matching pair of each of those socks.
Yeah, for sure.
They're somewhere in my house.
It's been weird with the merchandise. It's come out at odd times, and then there's been a big lull between releases. So we're hoping that picks up soon. We've been Fat Mojo, one of our contacts. We've been trying to get a hold of them to figure out when that Wave 2 is going to come out. But yeah, so far nothing new.
Yeah, I wish I had answers for you, but unfortunately I don't.
Yeah, those were great, and I mean, we're still waiting on Funko Pops. Man, would love to see the new style in the Pops. That would be great.
I think it's funny that the thing that a lot of people complained about was that our characters had square heads. You would think that Funko Pops would seize on the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were hoping because we saw that that one Scrooge came out that had that logo. And so we were hoping, but still nothing yet.
We couldn't wait to see the back of that box.
Yeah, well, we're disappointed on that one. Nothing good on the back.
You have said, I've seen it quoted a few times, and you may have said it a few times, but I had a question about this. You said you wanted DuckTales to do for Donald Duck what a Goofy movie did for Goofy. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of conversation around that. And so my question is, because I like what you're doing with Donald, I've seen other people have some complaints.
The internet?
The internet, right? That's where we live.
That's not like them.
What did you mean by that comment? And what I'm asking is, in your eyes, what did Goofy movie do for Goofy? Because I think some people maybe just had the wrong expectation.
No, a Goofy movie made Goofy a great three-dimensional dad who is capable of emotional depth. And really emotionally charge him. I mean, Goof Troop is fun and has a lot of emotion behind it, but I think Goofy movie is where, I'm a real big sucker for any time a funny character can make you cry. I don't know if you've watched DuckTales, but I think that if a character can make you laugh, a character is going to make you feel more deeply. And that, I think, I mean, to take one of the most ridiculous cartoon characters of all time and turn him into this really well-meaning dad. And that to me was the challenge with Donald, knowing full well that this is a show where the kids were the protagonists, but we didn't want to ship Donald off the way that he was in the original DuckTales. We felt that because this was a show primarily about family, that we wanted to build out Donald's motivations and have him feel emotionally connected to the family. And there's, people wish there was more Donald in the show. I do too, but there's only so much you can service with him. And you also just don't want to tell stories that don't matter, I guess. You only get so many steps up to the plate with iconic characters, and you want to make sure that everyone has some kind of depth. And ultimately, I'm more interested in Donald's relationship to his family than Donald running off on random adventures, in terms of, and that's not to slight Donald running off on random adventures. It's worked really well. But because the basis of our show is family, I always want to come at it from some perspective of what does it mean to these kids that Donald, is who he is, and he cares so deeply. And it was something I felt really passionate about, because in the original Donald cartoons, he's so stinking mean to Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and they are so mean back. And I wanted to make sure that we had the room to get to a lot of that kind of very fun, like contentious troublemaking attitude, and sticking Donald as the duck with all the bad luck. I think that sometimes that we did, I think part of people's complaints about, and even complaints, just comments about, oh, I wish Donald was more present, or I can't believe you shipped Donald to the moon, and then I can't believe you held Donald hostage on the moon in exchange for a little-known Mexican Kids' Choice Award. I think a lot of that is, I always take that with the potential compliment is like, we made people care about Donald Duck and think he's a good guy.
Absolutely.
So many of his appearances in classic cartoons are just him being a real jerk and it was very important to us that we did that reveal that Donald was going to anger management, and he was going to anger management for his kids. Like, he really cares. And it's funny, it was a request that they wanted to eventize some kind of thing, and then it didn't pan out, but we'd already made the episodes. They asked us, they really wanted us to have a character go missing for a period of time. So they could build a mystery around what happened to XYZ, etc. And it made sense to me to exchange Donald for Della, to see how those two different characters reacted to each other's circumstances, right? So it made sense. I wanted to see how Donald would react on the moon. And let me tell you something. Donald got back from the moon in less than 10 years. I wanted to see Della in isolation, trying to do what Donald had done for a long period of time. We all wanted that to happen. And also, we felt that the reunion between Donald and Della was going to be or feel so iconic that it threatened to overwhelm the reunion between Scrooge and Della, which was emotionally important for our show. Obviously, the extended reunions between Della and Huey, Dewey, Louie, introducing Webby, her weird relationship with Launchpad and his adversarial back and forth. We wanted to make sure that the Donald Della reunion had the space to have the weight that it needed. And so that's why, for any number of reasons, everything we do with the characters, we try to come at it from a place of character and emotion. And so that's kind of our thinking on some of that kind of stuff. We got a lot of characters to serve, and we want to try to make them all really, really good.
Yeah. No, you've done it. And when Donald is the one in Shadow War to push the family to forgiving Scrooge and going back, it was a perfect character arc for that story. Mm-hmm. of his hard feelings towards Scrooge and the spirit and Della, and then him being the one to say, no, it's more important that our family's together. It pulled all the right strings for me. I thought it was great.
That was the very first thing that we wrote in our grand mission statement was risk versus reward, and the difference between Scrooge and Donald. And Scrooge believes that he could take any risk because he has such insane overconfidence in himself that he believes that he can, if he lost everything tomorrow, he could roll up his sleeves and earn it all back. And Donald doesn't want to risk anything because he's had such bad luck, and he doesn't want to put the reward of his family in danger. And the core of it was, at one point in his history, Scrooge risked something that he couldn't earn back, and that was Della. And that was kind of the generative idea of like a family, what is the dark family secret? And that ended up giving us all of season 1. Like, why does a family fall apart? How can they come back together?
I have a question for you that you may not be able to answer, and it would be more exciting if you didn't answer, maybe. Can you tell us how long Donald and Della lived with Scrooge?
I can't.
Okay.
I cannot.
Okay. I mean, I've been wondering ever since last Christmas, how long have they been there? Have they always been there?
I will say that I don't think they lived with him full time. I think it was one of these things that he was, again, the extended Duck family, everyone just kind of hangs out at Scrooge's,
Okay.
Floating in and out of the mansion. But they all had rooms there. I had a room in my grandparents' house when I was growing up.
Okay, that's cool. All right. I know I got a message a minute ago that we've got some Dark Knight Returns questions that we cannot skip out on.
How dare you?
Yeah, I just have to say that I've seen that episode probably about as many times as Launchpad has seen the finale episode of Darkwing Duck, including I made sure to watch it in the parking lot just to.
Good for you.
But I feel like that is the best episode of any show I've ever seen in my entire life. And
no, watch more shows. Please.
No, you do not know how much television I watch. But even on Thanksgiving, I put what I was thankful for was that episode. It probably got more likes and retweets than anything I put out that week. So,
thank you.
That is just brilliant.
Yeah, So in the canon of, and this is shameless, in the canon of people who I believe influenced our version of DuckTales, there is Barks, there is Rosa, there's Scarpa, and Disney, obviously, and a bunch of other people. And pretty high on that list is Tad Stones, because Tad Stones serving as a generative story machine on so many of the properties that we loved, and also just being so supportive and having written what I believe to be some of the best scripted episodes. I think Darkly Dawns the Duck is the best scripted two-parter that the Disney Afternoon ever did. I think the Cola Cult is the best and craziest big swing that the Disney Afternoon ever did. I think I think it's crazy that episode got made, and it's so interesting. And because, and I've told this story before, Tad and I kind of got to know each other through social media, and I invited him into the office, and I think we were all kind of feeling each other out. I don't think DuckTales had premiered yet. And he comes into my office. We're all very cordial. Comes in my office, closes the door, is like, "Okay, what are you doing with my guy?" And I said, "Well, XYZ." I laid out at that period of time. I laid out the first season thing, and how it mattered so much to Launchpad and how it started in that place. And then I laid out the plot for Duck Knight Returns, and at that point it took place at a comic convention where they were going to announce the reboot of Darkwing Duck, and we scrapped that because, one, it's more fun to actually be on set and do that type of thing than just be in a comic convention, and also comic conventions are hard to animate because there are a lot of people around, and it involves a lot of design. But it was something that we had in our brains from the very beginning of, like, this is what makes sense to me. Like in that same realm of taking an iconic character, I think Darkwing was already pretty deep in the original series, and so it was important to me to figure out a legacy angle on the character that was absolutely true to the character and actually made all his bumbling and goofiness even more heroic. You know, the notion that no matter how hard he gets beat up or blown up or electrocuted or deep fried, he always gets back up to fight for what's right. And some of that is ego, and some of that is, one of the go-tos we have on him is we always compare Darkwing to Jackie Chan, in that, like in terms of a fighting style, because he's always outmatched, but he never gives in, you know? And I love that fight that he has at the end of the end of the first part of Moonvasion, where he's so beat up and it's just muscle memory that he's fighting these Moonlanders. And I think there's a lot to the notion of a character who has a weakness and still tries in spite of it. I think that's what makes that character iconic. And I really, look, a lot of the emotions and a lot of that speech in Duck Knight Returns come from me and what that character means to me. And what that character meant to me as a weird kid who saw a superhero who was funny and got beat up all the time, but never lost his sense of confidence and perhaps overconfidence. And also a hero that really cared about the people around him and his family. And that became the guiding light of that episode. And the notion that, I always said that Darkwing is only Darkwing with Goslin and Launchpad. And you kind of see what happens to Jim Starling. And that was always a big question I'd always had, because Tad liked to play with origin stories in the original series.
A little bit.
So you have, you have the Negaduck version of Negaduck. You have the Negaverse version of Negaduck. You have the Darkwing who was Lil Drakey. You have the Darkwing who was born on a distant planet. There are a lot of origins for a lot of characters on Darkwing. But the Negaduck version, I was always really interested in terms of the origins, like why? And I realized Negaduck's just Darkwing without people to keep him in check. They're so close to each other. And once I realized that, then that became an interesting story to tell. Is if Darkwing was just ego, if he had never taken in, and some of that is in the Time Top episode of with Dark Warrior Duck. Like, what happens if he doesn't have family in his life? And that ties into our whole MO of our show. I mean, I really legitimately think that that's an origin for Darkwing and Negaduck that you couldn't do outside of DuckTales, because it's so built into the DNA of our show. Is it all comes back to your family is weird, your family is big, your family is oddballs and people in armor and purple masks and stuff like that, but they're still family, and that's what keeps them together in spite of all their weirdness. So that is my TED Talk.
Yeah, I think you got slighted by not getting an Emmy nomination for that episode because, like I said, the best. But
hold on, have we been slighted? I thought the Emmy nominations hadn't come out yet.
What?
Oh dear God! Tell me you're not some sort of clairvoyant.
No, he's not. He's wrong all the time.
I have no power in these decisions. None. But yeah, that is such a great episode. It's definitely one of, even though it's Darkwing Duck focused. Whenever I have to turn somebody else onto DuckTales, that's the one episode I tell them, look, dude, you gotta watch this episode.
One of the things that we got really lucky on our show is that everybody kind of gets to work on the stories they want to work on. Like the story, we managed to have such a collaborative writer's room. And at the beginning of every season, as we're breaking out, all right, this is what the arc of the season is. These are the episodes we want to do. We kind of let everyone call their shots and volunteers. Like, I really want to do the Glomgold origin episode. I really want to do the Seed Vault episode. I really want to do, XYZ, and everyone kind of had their own specialties, right? So Bob got all the really interesting, weird narrative challenges that were also quirky and funny, and anything that had doofus in it. Colleen got a lot of the like heartfelt comedy episodes, and she was always pushing herself. She is always pushing herself to try new and interesting things. She volunteered to do the quiet, the mostly silent Donald episode because she felt like she was such a dialogue person that she wanted to try out some more physicality. Madison always goes for the updates of big adventure ideas that have a connection to heart and character and that kind of thing. And Christian is our like go-to big swing action guy. And each of these people can do everything. And we have Ben Simon join our crew in season 3. And he is just ridiculously funny and very, very talented. And he has some great episodes coming up that I can't wait for you guys to see. And the other nice thing is that we're all collaborating on every episode. It's why everyone has a story by. I like to say, if you were in the room for the writer's room break, I like to spread the story by around, because in animation, it doesn't give you any extra money. It's just nice to have that credit. But everyone contributes to everything. But that's the long way of saying, because we get to pick our shots, I've been lucky enough, because I'm in charge of the writer's room, to get to pick the ones that aren't like huge, difficult puzzles, but are rather the episodes where I just kind of spill my soul onto the page, beyond the pilot, which was a lot of moving parts and very difficult, but it was also like, oh my gosh, I get to write interior money bin. Oh my gosh, Scrooge says this. Oh my gosh, Huey says that. But Buddy System, Last Crash, Duck Night, Last Christmas, like those are all episodes where at some point I'm just kind of like, there's something inside of me that just needs to get out. And if Duck Night Returns does nothing, it at least proves that, man, do I love this guy. And man, does he speak to me on a fundamental level. Yeah.
Well,
Chris totally knocks it out of the park with his Darkwing.
He's great, isn't he?
Yeah,
I love it.
He's so good. He's such a classic. Have you ever seen his Three Stooges movie?
Yeah.
He's crazy good in that movie, and he's also a huge Stooges fan. There are a couple instances, I think in season 3 and possibly in season 2, where we've just asked him to play a random guard as Mo from the Three Stooges. But Chris is so good at making these big, broad, cartoony choices that are also feel contemporary and also human and real. And honoring Jim's performance, and Jim did knockout work as Starling and Negaduck. It's just such an interesting performance and take on that. But he, as with all things on our DuckTales, he really thread that needle, man, in terms of evolution.
Do we know what Negaduck was doing during the moon invasion?
Plotting? I guess, maybe. I don't know, actually. I don't know what most of the villains were doing. Not being in the episode.
Yeah, I kept thinking that the Panchito and Jose was going to show up in that episode. I think they're the only people from the season 2 recap that were missing.
We were talking about it, and then we realized, why would you go recruit a flight attendant and a children's party entertainer? There's a lot of conversation about that in the room, but I'm happy to say that we will definitely see them again.
Oh, good. That was one of Lexi's questions when I told her that I was going to be speaking with you. She's like, I got to know when the three cabs are coming back. She goes, and I said, well, he's not going to be able to tell us when. She goes, no, I got to know when, like how soon. And I'll tell
you, one of the caballeros is in a lot of episodes.
Ooh, Donald.
Yeah.
You were a little quicker on that.
And almost every episode of our show has some form of caballero in it.
I did like, and we talked about it on our podcast, I did like how Chris, his voice changed for his Drake and his Darkwing. Like he had a voice for Drake, and then when he'd put on the costume and he became Darkwing, it was almost like he was channeling that Jim Starling that he looked up to. And it's a great nod to the fact that he's just a fan, he's a fanboy of that character.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And it's a thing that I don't think the Batman movies generally acknowledge, but it's also something that Lynn does really, really well with Gizmo Duck. Yeah. Is there's a clear code switching going on between what it means to be a superhero and what it means to just be yourself. And there is something about putting on a costume that forces you to be different. And I love Lynn's performance as Gizmo Duck with all the faux bravado he can muster. It's really, really delightful to me.
I absolutely love the interaction between Gizmo Duck and Darkwing and the Moonvasion.
That was improvised by Lynn.
Oh, really?
Hi, I'm Gizmo Duck. When there's trouble, they call me.
And it kind of leads to, because in the original show, there was that kind of rivalry between them. I mean, you never really understood why.
Yeah. Oh, I know why. It's because Darkwing has an ego.
Yeah, it was a one-sided rivalry. I don't think Gizmo Duck even picked up on it.
One-sided rivalry. No. And I am proud to say that will carry through into season 3. How can you not? And it can't be a fight. They can't just fight each other, because there are much worse ways to hurt Darkwing than with a fight.
It's by not acknowledging him.
It's also... We have an episode coming up, and it's the source of one of my favorite running gags in the entire season between Darkwing and Gizmo Duck.
Ooh.
Very stupid. It's very and I'll preface this by saying, and I always have to explain it to everybody, when we in DuckTales say something is stupid, that is a mark of quality.
So the new take on Fenton, Crack Shell Cabrera, and Gizmo Duck, knocked it out of the park. The character is phenomenal. I'll be honest. The character, like Gizmo Duck, came on kind of late to DuckTales. I remember him more from Darkwing from my childhood, and so for the character, he was more that foil hero. Like he was there getting in the way, and so as far as for Fenton, you've got going back to DuckTales. It wasn't a character that I particularly liked, but your all's version of the character has been great from the very beginning. Like Buddy System, I mean, not only did we get that iconic opening with Darkwing, but then we get the introduction of this character, and it's full-on comedy. His office at Gyro's lab was great, but he's got such heart. And he's a character that's so dedicated to doing the right thing. Like he is a hero, but he doesn't realize it in and of himself until he gets the suit. And then it's like you said, it's a switch, and he becomes Gizmo Duck.
Yeah, and it's also, I really love kind of the thing that snaps it into focus for me is when he's talking about, I want to do so many different things, and I just like that. Solve world hunger, infrared toothbrush. Like, I think that's a really, it's a very grounded and relatable version of aspirational, I guess, or what it means to be a hero. It's like, I could do all these things I can do. And, it's certainly something that I feel in terms of we could do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. It's like, what if we just focused on the one thing? And that also just felt like that's such a great trait for a character who puts on an armor that has pies and buzzsaws and a million other things. It's like he can't commit to one of the 100 different things because he is part of all the different things. And that became a big part of his narrative, and certainly a big part of me personally and everybody on the crew being really excited. That's why it was so exciting to me to bring a Latino superhero and everybody on the team to DuckTales, not just as a token character, but as a character that was entirely informed by his heritage, but not defined by it. And I think a lot of all of this interesting stuff kind of meshes up in Fenton, as he's so many different things, and he has to try to be so many different things to so many different people, and he is each of these things. And it's kind of trying to figure out, how can I be this amalgamation of everything? I saw somebody online was complaining, it seems like every Gizmo Duck episode focuses on how hard it is for Fenton to be Gizmo Duck, or not wanting to be Gizmo Duck. And I'm like, yes, of course it is. Read a Spider-Man comic. You know? It's about trying to do good while being all the many different things to all the many different people. That's why, it wasn't just, oh, hey, I've got an idea, let's make him Latino. It was, oh, hey, I've got an idea. This is connected to who he is as a character.
So we know that Fenton's a favorite of yours. You even said it earlier on the podcast, and man, just getting Lin-Manuel Miranda to voice the character and to bring life to him is amazing. I know that was one of the major headlines when the show was announced and people were finding out about it. I mean, we saw it all over the internet and people were talking about it because his career had just, he'd been taken off for a few years at that point with Hamilton, and then moving into, had he already worked on Moana, or was that about the same time?
I think Moana was coming out around the time that he had already worked on it, but I think it was coming out around the time that we had cast him.
Yeah, so I know when I was telling the girls about who was playing certain characters, because they were familiar with the original show, and we were talking about Moana and the songs and his work on that. But I know that's a favorite of yours, and you've talked online about, just as you were saying about the representation and the fact that you were tweeting about it the other day as well, about having Latin characters in comics. You wish there were more. And I think that's one thing that your show has done a fabulous job of, in that when you're introducing these characters, because we've got the ducks traveling all over the world, so they're going to all these different cultures. And I know that the original DuckTales didn't do a great job of this. We see a lot of criticism now. Back then, it was probably more common, but now you see the criticism of, maybe those depictions weren't all that great, but you all have been doing a fabulous job of trying to bring in people from those cultures, with that background, to play characters that, just like you said, it's who they are. It's not just they're playing some, you're not bringing in people to do a voice.
Yeah, you want to try to be representative, right? And that was always one of our goals, was to make DuckTales look like the world that kids today see around them. That is diverse and interesting, and always making sure that, one of our big MOs is like, well, if there's going to be always trying to have both a positive and negative portrayal of certain nationalities or types, so you don't just fall into like, we're running the gamut on everybody. And it's like, well, we should have a Brazilian character, and we should have, it's not because you should have, it's because that's who the character is. And, we put a lot of time and effort into making those characters feel three-dimensional. And I think I mentioned it on Twitter. It's not hard, once you cast someone from a particular culture, or who speaks a specific language, and you want to incorporate that, to ask them to collaborate with you, to ask them to give you suggestions. That whole crazy Portuguese rant that Jose does at the beginning of Town Where Everyone Was Nice when he first meets the kids, that was all Nardo. That was all, we asked him to, go off and be excited in the way that you typically would in Portuguese. And representation is not hard if you care and if you try. I'll take that back. Sometimes there are challenges to certain elements, more so than others. Sometimes you have to thread a lot of needles to get at it. But it's certainly our responsibility as people who make content for children to help educate those children, even if it's not a particularly educational show.
I know you introduced Gandra D to the show. I was a little shocked, and pun intended, that kind of her twist that you guys added to her being more trying to get Gizmo Duck's like gear rather than kind of like being more. I know it kind of has the idea where she is kind of falling for him towards the end of the episode, but like her whole mindset where we're kind of working with Mark Beeks and then later she's part of Fowl, where it's kind of brings a whole other dimension as well. Not only that that before in the original story she was kind of like that preppy girl kind of feel, but now she's got a lot more depth and much more and like we were just saying with like the diversity in terms of like you have I think it's Jamil being the actress.
Yeah, Jamila is great, and again it was one of those instances where our casting department had heard Jamila just kind of come in and do a general. She was interested in trying to get into some VO. And they said, she's fantastic. You should listen to her. We listened to her, and she was awesome and great. And she came and did this weird California thing that none of us were expecting. But it was super fun. And then that just informs who the character is,
Yeah,
if you don't particularly care about if you're open to anything, then everything is on the table, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of that tech stuff, that tech side of her, actually comes from the original DuckTales, where they did a one-off joke in, I forgot the name of the episode. It's the one where Fenton is confused as a spy. It's essentially just Double O Duck with Fenton.
Is it the duck that knew too much? Is it that
the duck that knew too much, too little, too much, too little?
Maybe too little.
Yeah, one of those. But there's a running gag that she tried to go to night school for cosmetology, but that was all full. So she took an advanced class in biochemical engineering, and she pilots a big robot. And I was like, we can use that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of taking her down this Halt and Catch Fire, punk rock rebel garage science. It was a thing that we didn't really have in our show, and rightfully calling out. I really like that scene where she calls out that everything Scrooge is asking Gyro to invent involves finding more money. That's a commentary that it's hard to do on a show where your main hero is a billionaire. But someone should certainly point it out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys do with her.
Oh, especially after that surprise.
Yeah.
She's got some really cool stuff coming up. Jamila really knocks it out of the park coming up.
So is there...
This is going to be a gotcha one. I can feel it.
We're going to find a better way to ask it.
How do I say this? Do you hate anyone?
So about Bubba, the cave dog.
Yeah, about Bubba.
I am very proud that one of the stupidest things we did is say that Bubba is the first of the line of Clan McDuck. And it's also very interesting to me in a Doctor Who fan time travel aficionado way that Scrooge essentially created the line of Clan McDuck.
Right.
Just by virtue of a cave duck seeing Scrooge's stuff and then him imitating Scrooge. Like, it's a very paradoxical Lindeloffian thing that is very stupid.
All right, so Mitch, next time you see Don Rosa, I dare you to ask him where Bubba is on his family tree.
Oh boy.
I've got a copy of that tree right here.
Uh-huh.
I don't see Bubba. But
Did you check the roots?
to check the roots? Yeah. I loved it. I loved the how you all incorporated Bubba, and at the end I was really surprised, and then I was like, okay, that's what Frank's been talking about, the stupid thing that everybody's going to get mad about. It's like, that's got to be it, because it's hysterical.
Like, I get it, right? Like, a lot of fans really don't care for him, and that's why it felt important to give those fans a voice in terms of Huey. And just calling out as like, he's skateboarding and playing a guitar. This is not right. And kind of calling out the last ditch, refresh the series Cousin Oliver elements of it.
Right.
The Bubba and Juliet version of him, where he just kind of overtakes the show. But he's a good character. He's got a good, interesting core conceit that's really fun. And so I felt like it was really important to have someone like get all hung up and very angry and mad about it, and then ultimately just say, what am I complaining about? This is awesome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, who didn't enjoy Encino Man? I mean, we can all admit that now, right?
Safely, I think. Yeah. We could only say it in Dark Shadows prior.
It was some of their best work.
Still formulating that gotcha question.
How about this question in the meantime?
I'm trying to get. I've realized I've talked a lot. I'm trying to give the other guys a moment.
So how about this question? So as we're waiting for season 3, how can fans best support the show in the meantime while we wait for the upcoming episodes?
By loving it, I guess, by doing all the things that our amazing fans already do, talking about it, spreading the word, telling people about it on Disney Plus. It's now easier than ever, I think, to find a place to watch our show. Hopefully it'll be in the right order very soon. Spread that order around. I know Disney Plus is very busy and they have a lot of things to worry about. So I'm just doing my part to see if I can help spread awareness. Post about it, talk about it, show it to your friends, keep holding out hope. I'm doing my best on my end to keep the fires burning with this ridiculous hashtag rewrite history endeavor that I've embarked upon, committing myself to spending too much time walking down memory lane on these episodes as we're waiting for season 3. Yeah, I mean, all the things that our amazing fans would do anyway, and just trying to spread that fandom to other people.
I know just before we got you on the phone, Steve was double checking to see if Disney Plus had updated the episodes yet. He's
and have they?
No, not since we started. But
you guys wanted the scoop.
We did.
You're going to keep me on for several hours on the off chance that you'll be able to get my initial reaction.
That's what the pause was. I was checking Disney Plus. It's still not there.
I mean, thankfully they did season 2, because season 2 was so whacked out of order that made
they jumped on that and pretty fast, and we were really appreciative for that. And we just have, but that was all the more reason when they fixed that and they hadn't rearranged the other thing. We're like, all right, now we really got to roll up our sleeves. So that they are aware that there are still problems.
Yeah. People tweeting about, hey, why is Scrooge meeting the family or meeting the kids in the 4th episode?
Sure.
Like, oh no, that's not good.
Oh, I thought of my question. Okay, so I didn't see any gargoyles in the season 3 poster. Is that more of like a season 4 thing?
I'm not at liberty to talk about gargoyles at this time.
Nice.
It's a good answer.
It's a good answer.
It kind of seemed that.
I can assure you, if we did reference them, it would be very stupid.
Well, I like the Mighty Ducks nod that was in that one episode.
Yeah, Mighty Ducks was harder to figure out because they're like, isn't that crazy? These are ducks that are aliens. It's like, our Earth is full of ducks.
Was the episode?
We did try to have a runner, and I believe it's canon within our show that every Duckburg sports team is known as the Mighty Ducks.
Oh, cool.
The hockey team, the football team, the baseball team, all the Mighty Ducks.
The Gummy Bears reference you had in the first season was so great. I think I did a blog on that, and it's been one of the most popular ones that people like seeing that Gummy Bears was in DuckTales. Yeah,
I think I've said this before. I love that episode so much because it feels like the promise of what we were going for on DuckTales. It's like you got Fowl and Shush. You have a top secret formula that is gummy berry juice. You have all these nods to the thing. And that gummy berry juice is still hanging out there somewhere.
In the episode A Nightmare on Kilmore Hill where they kind of go in the whole dream sequence, and Magica turns Lena kind of into that gargoyle-esque kind of character. Was that a nod to gargoyles at all? Because she kind of looked like Demona to me. And so I was...
If we do a nod to gargoyles, it will be very apparent to you.
Okay, all right.
We're not gonna be subtle about it.
Yeah. Well, I know it wasn't like announcing anything or not, but it just looked very gargoyle-esque when she was turned into that creature.
I can't wait to see from San Diego Comic-Con when you announced some of the characters from season 3, and everybody started geeking out about Rescue Rangers and Goofy and everything. I think the Wuzzles one was my favorite from your slideshow.
So we had a story idea in season 1 called the Island of Dr. Duckenstein. And the basic idea there was that it was a mad scientist island where a mad scientist was combining animals for his own sadistic will. And again, not the Wuzzles, legally, entirely distinct from the Wuzzles. But the idea of animals that are two types of fun wrapped up and rolled into one kind of stuck around, and we're using them in a really crazy episode that Tanner Johnson, our director, actually wrote the episode, and that one is another big kind of love letter episode, which is cool.
So Josh reminded me of something that I'd completely forgot about that I have to ask you about. In IDW's recent Uncle Scrooge comic, it was issue 49. Did you see the issue?
Remind me.
So 49 is part of the story. I think it's like the third part of the story. It's called Under Siege, and it's a reprint it's first publication in the U.S. of one of the Italian stories from 2017. So this story was published in 2017 originally, but it has Donald and Feathery trying to find a new location for the money bin.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah, I remember that.
So, which came first? Because that looks just like your all's money bin on that island.
For sure, they were riffing on us.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a Youngberg, and I will say this, and I have not talked about him enough. Matt Youngberg is the single greatest showrunner and creative collaborator anyone could ever have, and almost 100% of the DNA comes from Youngberg. We are all in great hands because of him. And it was his idea to do that kind of, his logic, him and Sean Jimenez's logic was really embracing brutalist architecture and making it something akin to Fort Knox. Or not Fort Knox, excuse me, Alcatraz. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, a lot of people are like, why would you put all the money out there? It's like, do you know how hard it is to move that much money over ocean?
It's true. So is that why the mansion is on Kilmotor Hill and the money bin is on the island?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's something that once we realized it, I think it was with one of those Louis shorts that he mentioned that his address was on Kilmotor Hill. Mm-hmm. That was the first time we realized that the mansion was on Kilmotor Hill, instead of the money bin.
Yeah, the highest point in Duckburg made sense.
Interesting.
And I think we had named that area next to it Rocker Duck Estates before we even had John Rocker Duck on there.
Yeah, it was on the map.
Yeah.
Do you know if we can expect episodes in 2020? I mean, I know you're not allowed to say dates or anything, but do we think season 3 will be 20?
I don't have firm dates, to be honest, but I would be very surprised if we didn't see anything in 2020.
Great.
I personally would be quite flummoxed if we didn't see some DuckTales content in 2020.
Great.
You know, I'm
very good about tiptoeing around the spoilery stuff.
Well, I realized just a few moments ago, and this is when I got flustered and paused for a moment. We hadn't talked about Gosselin at all, except for you saying that how pivotal she was to the character. And then I was thinking about the poster, and then it got my mind to reeling of, oh man, we could talk forever about that poster and all the different, like, you had us trying to figure out what that watermelon was for the longest time before it showed up and not expecting it in season 2 and wondering if he will show up again in season 3 now.
It'd be really hard, wouldn't it?
I mean, it'd be kind of gruesome.
Given circumstances.
He's in Gladstone's stomach right now.
Maybe
I don't know.
Yeah. So, but we're really looking forward to that character, and I know you've talked a lot on Tumblr. You've had a lot of questions. You filled a lot of questions on Tumblr.
I do what I can.
Well, we appreciate it. We actually have a segment. I don't know if you know this or not. We have a segment in our show called Frankly Speaking. And,
yes, yeah.
And we just quote you.
I'm enough of an egomaniac to be aware of all segments named after me.
So I usually go to Tumblr because that's where all the juicy stuff is, because you were on top of it. And there's so many people are excited about Gosselin coming to the show and asking questions about who she'll interact with and, you know, who will she get along with the most and all of those. It's really great. I guess if I were to ask you one thing and trying to avoid asking spoiler questions because I don't want to get, I can't tell you, I want to get something. With Gosselin, is there anything you can tell us about what it meant to you to be able to create that character? Because I have a feeling, I'm not going to say that, because for so many of us, she was our Robin into Batman's world. So like she was, you know, we related with her as kids. She lived a fun life. She had, you know, all this cool stuff going on.
That's a very interesting comparison. I will say that.
Okay.
I will say that, and I will also mention that there are a couple of different Robins.
Ooh.
And perhaps our original Gosselin version of Robin is not the new Gosselin version of Robin. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But yeah. Oh, yeah, I get to write every character that I've ever loved from when I was a kid. Yeah, it's great. You know? We got away with a lot of stuff, and, you know, luckily, you know, just with those couple of references in the pilot to Spoonerville and St. Canard and Cape Suzette, Disney realized how much buzz that would generate for the show and let us get away with a lot, frankly. And, you know, we've only been told that one character is entirely off limits, and don't tell anybody, but we kind of did him. But no, yeah, Gosselin is, you know, if Webby is based on my oldest kid, Gosselin is kind of based on my youngest, which I always felt was appropriate because Tad always said that Gosselin, the original Gosselin, was based off of what he imagined his 2-year-old at the time would be like when she was, I think, 12 or 10. And that is very much our take on Gosselin as well, but adjusted for my 3-year-old.
I can't wait. I can't wait for my kids to be introduced to her because I have a little Gosselin. And we got to meet Jim Cummings a few weeks back, and he called her Gosselin, and she was like, how did he know? How did he know that you called me that? But just looking forward to everything coming up, and we can't wait for season 3. We're definitely going to be out there trying to spread the word and make sure people know. I mean, it's a great show, and anybody our age is probably going to have some sort of connection to the Disney afternoon. So, it's the perfect show in my view for bringing families together, especially since that's the whole focus of the show.
Thank you for saying that. I really do appreciate it. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm really appreciative to you guys and, all the various other podcasts out there like Amotis Patos. And there are a couple of guys, I don't know if they're still a going concern, and certainly Michael and Sarah, who now have Michael and Sarah Save Christmas, and helped inform when they were doing It's a Duck Blur, helped me really power through the original 100 DuckTales episodes again, provide necessary context. Like, it is so gratifying to make a show that kids love and that fans respect too. And I hope everyone knows how grateful I am for all you guys and all you guys on the internet and everyone on social. We had that hashtag get picked up by Twitter, why I love DuckTales. And that was a really emotional thing. It's a great thing. It's almost a Muppet thing, right? Like it's an amazing thing when you find all the same weirdos who love all the same stuff that you do. And if you're lucky enough, you get to do it. And I've been very lucky throughout this entire process. So I do really want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for having me on. And thank you for continuously thumping the drum for our weird little show about ducks. I really do appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate everything you've done to revitalize the Ducks in the Disney afternoon, and for coming on. I think it's great for all of us fans. I mean, like, I realize how it's really cool for me to be able to sit here on a microphone and talk with you, but it's also very cool that you get an opportunity to talk to all the fans that are out there. I mean, because that's all we are. We're just a group of fans that figured out how to press record on a computer and found some people that would allow us to host it somewhere. Sure. It's just great that you're willing to get to come on and to talk with us. So thank you again. And thank you for DuckTales.
No, thank you guys. And again, season 3 coming at indeterminate date in the future. I'm sure I tell you what, I'm going to bet that DuckTalks lets me know what the premiere date is before I find out myself.
I was going to say, we'll make sure you know when we know.
Thank you. I appreciate your service.
And that's it. One of our longest episodes. Worth it. Totally worth it. We had a great time with Frank. Oh man, I can't thank you all enough. Everything that we get to do with this podcast, it's all because of you all listening and interacting with us, letting us know, just chatting with us about DuckTales. And when we started doing the podcast, I didn't think we would do interviews. I never expected to do interviews, and to tell you the truth, I was a little afraid of them. When Pirate started talking about trying to book people from the new DuckTales and the old Disney afternoon and the classic Disney afternoon, when we started talking about doing those things, I wasn't too sure about it. But to be honest with you, as much as I get, a little panicky before we get on the phone with whoever we're speaking with, I really do enjoy it, and I enjoyed this episode. So I just want to say thanks to everyone who's listening and for supporting us. If you're looking for more content, go to DuckTalks.com and be sure to interact with the blogs, share them, let other people know. We're going to be in rumor mode pretty soon, I believe. It shouldn't be much longer before we start getting news about season 3 and when it may come. Not sure exactly when that'll start showing up, but I have a feeling we should be on the lookout for it soon. And we'll be talking about that, and we'll be talking about Disney Plus And the Disney Afternoon being on Disney Plus, we'll probably take some time to dive into some of those shows and have some conversations about those. We also have some other interviews coming up. And you guys know me, I don't like to put those people on the spot until after we've actually recorded the podcast. But we've got some Legend of the Three Caballeros stuff coming up. Hopefully got some more DuckTales 2017 stuff coming up. And we have been in talks with some people from some classic Disney Afternoon stuff. So we should get a good mix of interviews coming up in the new year. And then, of course, we'll have some of our friends on to talk about episodes and stuff too. But yeah, just thank you all. And thanks, Frank, if you're listening. We enjoyed having you on, and we'll be sure to pass along any information we come across about your show. So until next time, y'all stay glom golden. And if you can dream it, you can do it. That's it. Yep. All right. Good night. Bye.